our neighbor. Loving our neighbor, this is why we reach out, why we care for each other, why we volunteer, why we offer ourselves and share ourselves love. This is why we send cards and why we visit each other and why we check in. We haven't talked to people in a long time. And when we call people from across the country and why they fly across the country to visit and why you gather together, right? Love, right? This is why we listen to each other's stories, why we ask questions, why we try to be there for each other when they're hurting, why we wait around to hear the answer. Love. This is why we stand with people who are sad and why we challenge our assumptions. This is why we seek transformation, because of love. This is why we can sit across the table from someone who thinks differently than we do, and we can have a conversation with them. Love. This is why we don't jump to conclusions about people or judge people based on some very slice of what we think we understand about another person. Love. This is why we come here every week, or every other review. We come here because it's in the hearing and the practicing of love that what happens? We get better at it, right? We get better at loving our neighbor. When we're sitting with each other's pain, we actually become alleviators of the pain. When we sit with each other's prayers, we become carriers of prayer. This is what it means to love our neighbor. And not just our neighbor in this room, our neighbor who we know, our neighbor who we don't know, our neighbor who we see that needs our help when we step in. This is all what it means to operate from that place of love and that place of extension, that place of being a person who's holding God's love as our source. And then we share it out. Someone mentioned the other day, in light of the Gaddafi's pretty brutal murder situation over there, and all the rejoicing that followed that when we treat each other with inhumanity, we actually become inhuman, right? So the people who were, I didn't really closely read the story, but the people who were beating him up and stuff once he was caught, might not have been people that were inhumane, but in that moment, in that situation, in the exacting of their rage, they lose a part of their humanity, right? And we've seen that countless times in the segregated South, back in the 50s and 30s and slavery times. We've seen that in every situation when people look at another and make a decision about another and treat them inhumanely, we actually become dehumanized ourselves. Well, this is exactly why Christ calls us to be different, because the opposite is true as well. When we behave lovingly, when we love our neighbors, when we love God, we actually become carriers of love. That's okay. That's it.
She's carrying love.
The first one ever. Carriers of love. Thank you, John, for that lovely image. When we love our neighbors, we become loving. When we look out for each other, we become carriers of love. And when we look out for the least of these, we discover that, wow, we actually are being cared for as well. So when we bite our tongues and when we pray for our enemies, we're filled with self-control in prayer, and this is what it means to love our neighbor. This is what it means to do step. When we begin with loving God, we begin with the fullness in our hearts, and in our souls, and in our minds, and in our strength. And in that fullness, we can pass it around. And that's what people of faith are called to do. That's what people of faith are called to do, is to carry that love of God out into the world. world in a way that other people experience.